Let's launch things off with Whack, which has one of the goofiest strategies in the entire challenge. After opening the first door with a bomb, I attempted the same strategy on the giant sloping track I needed to ride a minecart up. That went not great, so I tried changing tactics by floating there with octoballoons, although it seems like the carts are attached to the track somehow and won't lift off. But there is something else that magnetizes the railings, your shield while shield surfing. But surely it's not possible to surf up a slope that steep, right? Okay, maybe he could get part of the way, but definitely not the whole thing. Like, how would you even get any momentum? Wouldn't Link just slide back down? How can he even stand on it for long enough to jump again? This game makes no sense, and I am perfectly fine with that. The minecarts up top aren't on any railings, but they are super heavy, forcing me to make a small, tiny investment of, oh, I don't know, about 70 octoballoons to float it up high enough to glide to the goal. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Tears of the Kingdom's most insane runeless shrines. In part 1, I covered the first 3 difficulty categories of very easy, easy, and medium, which encompassed 115 of the 152 shrines in this game, leaving 37 to talk about here. Well, 36 now, and while I originally planned to just discuss the hard and insane categories, this challenge has shaped up to be a bit more complicated than I initially thought. Imagine that! So hard and insane shrines are up first, followed by my quest to enter Korok Forest. And to finally answer the question, can you beat every shrine without runes? I'll close out the video with the ones I believed were impossible. Maybe there aren't any. As I write this, I actually do not know. Let's find out together, shall we? Quick disclaimer, I occasionally did test out strategies with runes, but I always reloaded to a previous save afterwards, so as far as I'm concerned, it's clean. You'll see some of that footage throughout the video, and if you're going to be extreme about it, then misinputting Fuse when trying to switch bows can invalidate 100 hours of gameplay, and I am not going there. Creating this video punctured a hole in my sanity because it required a lot of pain and suffering, so if you want to support future challenges and help to regrow my lost brain cells, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment. Also, I really value your feedback, so please let me know what you think of the video by liking or disliking. On to the shrines. Ego Shan is about manipulating water, and the second gap intends for the player to use recall, reversing the falling orb. However, the devices in the first section go just barely high enough to glide over to this platform, and wow, you can climb on it? I did not know that. At the end, you're meant to create a ramp with this platform to redirect the ball, and after trying and failing to balance on this thing for a while, I was almost ready to fly to the end. However, this shrine is entirely in low gravity, which spices things up. This allowed me to repeatedly jump and readjust my position on top, which would have been completely impossible in normal gravity. Also, the octoballoon floated higher. Once it popped, I was able to paraglide to the end. Geosin would also be easier with flying, but the first gap can be crossed with a speed potion and a precise shield jump. From there, I bombed this chest and knocked it over to the end, where I had a rather unpleasant experience attempting to balance on it while floating up with octoballoons. My struggles here were a key factor in choosing future shrines, because it seems like these chests were specifically coded to make Link slip off as soon as he got on top, but eventually I got high enough to climb up to the exit. I platformed across the first pool of water in Razawak's shrine with a semi-precise jump onto this floating ball, and the ramp can easily be raised with octoballoons. The last bit is somewhat tricky though, because this button opens the door, but the only object heavy enough to activate it are the yellow balls, which are light enough to float on the water. What? Link will sink in the water, why isn't he heavy enough to press it? The physics in this game make my head hurt. I need to get one of those balls over to the end without it falling in the water, because that will make it unrecoverable. A bunch of bombs and a lucky launch can do that for me, and then it's just a matter of floating the ball above the target. Tukarok is also about getting an activator ball to the end of the level, which is, yeah, this is gonna be a recurring theme. I hope you like watching me put balls in holes. Wait, that came out wrong. Anyway, this particular sphere is located on the low side of a very large wall, so it's going to take a lot of balloon floating to get it up there, which is inherently very imprecise. I managed to get it relatively close to the lip, where a lucky bomb throw was enough to blast it to the end. Gano's Shrine is a crystal obtained by defeating a flux construct, and luckily a pre-built machine is provided nearby to transport it up to the altar. Without being able to attach the crystal with Ultra Hand though, I just had to set it on top and cross my fingers that it wouldn't roll off as I flew up there. That did not work at first, or at second, but I did manage to get it up there on my third attempt. It almost bounced right off again, but thankfully was blocked by the launcher. Ikatak's crystal is in a big hole in the ground, but it's not too difficult to float out with octoballoons. I started inside with it, then launched myself out with a spring to finish it off from up top. I shot it a few times to make sure it didn't fall back into the hole, and in a moment of panic when the balloons popped, I threw another before grabbing it. Whoa, Link can be dragged across the ground by balloons? Honestly, he should just be able to grab onto them and float like Mary Poppins. That would make this challenge way easier.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!
Ogum is found inside a cave with no easy way out. I tried floating it across this gap, but could never get it across in time, and whenever it fell down, the crystal would respawn. After a few failed attempts, I pivoted to trying to blast it through the waterfall instead. It landed deep in water with just a tiny part poking above so it didn't respawn. I used bombs to knock it close enough to land to pick up, or I put it on the edge and activated 3 time bombs underneath. The area near the altar is covered in extremely shallow water, so it didn't need to be a super accurate shot. Akujizi is located so far from its platform that it's not even funny, far enough that launching with explosions becomes a serious issue. 5 bombs is too many, 4 is barely not enough. Ugh, fine, time for plan B. There are some anti-gravity platforms on an island near the altar, and they even have rockets attached to make it easier to get over there. Except the rockets make it fly way too high. Darn it. Time for plan C. Very slowly, I knocked the platform over to the crystal with melee attacks, then floated it up with balloons, grabbed the crystal, and jumped back on board. All I needed at that point was a lot of patience. Mayhem is the hardest crystal shrine in the entire game, except for the one in the insane category, but I'll get to that eventually. After defeating a flux construct, I was faced with a similar rocket and floating platform situation, except this time the altar was super far above me. But this was actually before I learned that you could hit these platforms to move them, and now that I think about it, maybe this wasn't the hardest. Felt like it at the time though. I used a rocket to reach the top, and angled the platform slightly with a balloon on the edge so it would get closer. Then I launched the crystal with a time bomb, landing it in an extremely precarious position at the edge of the island. From there, some mild octoballoon shenanigans helped me reach the main part of the island where the altar was accessible. In the quest to unlock Jochisiu, you can see me using an incredibly useful Korok Leaf fused weapon to manipulate floating objects. Hang on, don't worry, before you flood the comments with cries of cheater and wow, he's so cute, but also a cheater. I didn't use any runes to obtain this. Instead, the Captain construct in the Tetris Shrine, which also definitely belongs in the next category, helpfully fused it for me. Then I murdered it and stole the weapon. Easy. This will prove extremely useful in the challenges ahead. For Jochisiu specifically, ice blocks of the correct sizes need to be inserted into these 3 diamond-shaped holes. The wind from my weapon allowed me to direct the ice after floating it with balloons, and while getting it up this slope without it sliding back down was pretty annoying, there wasn't too much to worry about once I blew it into the main area. Throwing a balloon onto the corner of the ice lifted it to the correct position, and then it was just a matter of messing around for a little while until I maneuvered it into the correct hole. Fortunately, the game is quite lenient when it comes to the specific size of various ice blocks. Kurikat is also unlocked with a shrine quest. The player needs to dye the white pattern black, which really just means cast a shadow over this design at 6 AM. Putting something right up against the wall doesn't work though, because the game is stupid, because the shadow needs to come from this platform with the rotating stone block. After messing around with a few different Zonai devices, I realized that a hover stone was the obvious solution, so I floated up on one, and when I tried to destroy the octo balloon so it stopped rising, Link missed and switched off the platform, which swung down and created the shadow completely by accident. I mean, it wasn't a perfect shadow, but I will absolutely take a grade of good enough in the context of this challenge. Ryogak is... wait, why did I put it in the hard category? It's clearly impossible. The only way to open the door is by moving that gear, and the only way to do that is by attaching the cylinder to the gears with Ultra Hand. Bombs won't move it, balloons won't make it budge. It's not a traditional physics object.
Hey, did you try using bombs?
Yeah, I just said... wait, who are you? How did you get into my video? Why are you 3-dimensional?
I'm TheBoxLynx, and... well, as it turns out, we've been doing almost identical challenge runs for the last month or so.
Huh, that is quite the coincidence.
And I finished mine before you.
Seriously? Come on.
The good news is, you're completely wrong. Ryogak is totally possible. Just activate the gear, she'll jump up there, and glide over to this gap in the wall.
Okay.
Then throw a bomb at this extrusion, and if you're lucky, Link will fall through the gap.
Wow, that was pretty easy actually. I can take it from here though. Float up on this pillar to the next platform, and from there, just use balloons to move it upward and jump to the next one. Repeat once more and you're at the end. Thanks Lynx, I owe you.
No problem.
Jurudu Gumak wants me to build a flying device with Ultra Hand, and because I was never able to reach the end on one of the basic provided wings, I just cheesed it with the infinite height glitch. Turns out that Link is already a flying device all by himself. Talyasapun begins with an obstacle where the obvious solution is to use recall to clear the path of these rolling boulders, and while it's technically possible to prevent them from respawning with some lucky octoballoon manipulation, this is super inconsistent, so after trying for over half an hour, I just decided to fly over the gap. The next part is easily solved by knocking the activator sphere across the floor, then blasting it into the goal with 2 bombs, which took me a couple tries, but the backboard lowers the required precision. A well-timed bomb throw is all it takes to knock down the next ball, and the final puzzle is just another bomb launch. Kudanisar, like the last two, is technically possible without glitches, but it really just did not seem worth the effort. During early challenge testing, I was able to get over the first wall by using octoballoons on these wooden planks, but when I came back to it more prepared later, I either hadn't learned or didn't remember that wind gusts could help position them, so I just flew over the first wall. The bulk of the shrine is a puzzle about retrieving the activator sphere after it gets launched away, but that happens in a cutscene, so there's no way to interact with it first. However, dropping bombs will cause the orb to bounce to the right and miss the little castle that it would have landed inside. So when the flowing sand finally pushes it back to the main area, I could float it up to the goal with octoballoons. Let's finish up the hard shrines with Mayamats, the only one in the category that actually requires glitches. Yet another large activator ball needs to be escorted to its cradle so the door will open and let me through, and this one starts its life by rolling into the void at a location unreachable by normal means. After flying up, I tried to blast it onto the track with no luck. Instead, I shield surfed up there, hit it with a balloon, and used a bomb to blow it to the nearby platform and myself into the void. Then I whacked it over to the edge, dropped some bombs, and used an explosion to launch it over the gap. Alright, I'm done. On to the insane shrines. Wait, no, what is it doing? Fine, guess I've got to do it again. This time I managed to drop it onto the railings, and I made sure to blast it diagonally so it wouldn't fall off again. There we go. That wasn't too bad, but trust me, it gets so much worse from here. I'll start off the insane category with perhaps the most anticlimactic of them all. Mayatat would have been an absolute cakewalk had I not stubbornly refused to use the infinite height glitch. As you can tell from my number of hearts, I was still quite early in this challenge. 40 minutes of increasingly enraged balloon balancing later, I managed to make it over the first wall, and the rest of the shrine was easily solved by shield jumping through the flowing sand. I'll be honest, my ranking system is just a little arbitrary, but if I put a shrine in the insane category, it's a good bet that it took me at minimum half an hour to complete. However, there is a single exception to that rule of thumb, because after completing Jikais, I didn't have any thumbs left. I'm pretty sure that it's just a few simple ascend puzzles, although because of the strictly vertical layout of the shrine, that left me no recourse except for flying. So yeah, if you're gonna make me do the infinite height glitch for 10 straight minutes, you've earned yourself a one-way ticket to the most difficult category. Q-Yo-Yu is a silly target-based shrine, rather than a much cooler target-based shrine. More of a pressure plate really, I suppose, but the devil's in the details. And, it would seem, in the pressure plate, because a massive stone slab isn't enough to weigh it down, but a small block of ice is? That doesn't make any sense.
This game makes no sense, and I am perfectly fine with that.
But obviously I don't like it this time because it doesn't work in my favor. What do you want from me? Ideological consistency? Fine, I can still make this work. Problem is, if the block of ice is under the fire, it melts, and then it can't press the button any longer. In order to actually solve this, I started by retrieving the stone slab from the adjoining room, which required a trek on these spikes. When I finally got around to completing this shrine, though, my health was mostly upgraded, so the quarter heart lost every few seconds was not a concern beyond forcing me to time my octo balloons correctly. Once I maneuvered it down there and through the door, I gusted it just a bit further until it was lying slanted off the button. At that point, I tried to push the ice block on so the pressure plate would be activated by proxy, but whenever I tried, the ice just slid back off, and yeah, fair, I probably should have predicted that. After a couple calculated explosions, the slab was in a much more useful, non-slanted position. That allowed me to shrink the ice cube to a manageable size, float it up, and push it onto the edge, which, that tiny thing can weigh down the pressure plate? You've gotta be kidding me. Sinakawak is all about hot air balloons and features 3 major puzzles. The first is an introduction to the device, and the player is supposed to build a contraption to fly over the wall, but the balloon's long shape means that balancing on it while floating isn't too hard. Opening the door requires a balloon to float up and hit the button, which I accomplished by stacking 2 candles and throwing a torch at its peak for just a bit of extra height. The final area is what really bumps it up to this category though, because I had to get an activator ball out of a giant pit. Octoballoons are the obvious answer, of course, but it's not quite so simple. I quickly learned that the hole is far too deep to throw balloons all the way up, so floating it out from below wasn't gonna happen. There is a series of catwalks provided above, but every new balloon I threw just popped the previous one. Of course, there are plenty of non-Octorok balloons provided, given the shrine's theming, and wouldn't you know, this little basket on the bottom can perfectly carry the ball. It's finicky though, you can't just drop it in, you have to throw it. This was a lot more promising, so I got halfway and blasted it up the rest with a bomb. Please land. Please land. Take two, from on top this time. I tossed the orb into the basket, then landed on the balloon to ride it up, and fine. Okay, that was pretty dumb. Guess I'll just go with the slow, safe, boring method of floating up a balloon with balloons. A few minutes later, I grabbed the ball at the top and completed the shrine. Orochium probably has the most complex solution in the entire game, and that's with abilities. Without, it's definitely the most complicated. While the actual win condition is as simple as getting an orb to the goal, this particular orb is located inside a castle with multiple layers of security. That's right, it's a heist mission, where we, murder the guards. Never mind, guess that makes it an infiltration? Regardless of the correct terminology, the activator ball is inside, and that means Link has to get inside as well. These large doors are the first major obstacle because neither balloons nor bombs seem able to affect them, so I flew over the first wall and defeated the constructs. The next doors can be opened by octo balloons, albeit slowly and inconsistently, and the sphere sits inside behind a locked door. The small key is located below, but the only way to reach it is by falling into this pit by intersecting the lasers. Only once I traversed the next laser obstacle and flew up to the chest did I realize I was completely trapped. The player is forced to ascend out of here because after you enter, the trapdoors close and you're, well, trapped. Don't know how else to put it. What saved me is the same thing that dropped me down here in the first place, the lasers. As long as something intersects them, the doors stay open, which allows me to drop a weapon, go collect the key, come back, and what? How does that even... I reloaded, tried again, and when I'd flown out, I threw a bomb to unblock the lasers. One last problem, how do I get the ball out? At first, the door seemed like a no-go, so I tried floating it with balloons. After a few failures, I decided to re-evaluate the possibility of the door. It wasn't too hard to get the sphere over there, and while Link couldn't follow it directly, I could fly up the wall and drop down on the other side of these lasers. Turns out, hitting the door will open it the tiniest sliver, and it only took 10 minutes of this to make a gap wide enough for the ball? I am so glad that podcasts exist. Jochi EU, aka the Jenga Shrine, has a very simple solution. Orbs and holes and all that jazz. Simplicity does not preclude difficulty, however, because said orb is completely out of my reach. Landing on or near the Jenga tower it sits atop will drop the entire thing into the void. So floating with octoballoons, right? Well, I mean, that is definitely the solution, but not so fast. There's no good location to throw balloons from because even after moving this platform to its maximum distance, I was still perpendicular to the ball. Plus, half the starting platform is a giant slope, and if the ball lands on it, there's no stopping the ensuing decline. But overall, there's nothing fancy about this solution. Eventually, I just got lucky, the sphere floated to the right place, and a thrown bomb was enough to safely launch it onto the platform. Mayak is another pressure plate shrine, forcing the player to manipulate absurdly heavy spheres. This might be the only physics object in the game that I couldn't float with any amount of balloons, meaning that they're almost as massive as your mom. This posed a problem because the target in the first room only stays out for about a second. Without the precision to move it as soon as the weight is directly overhead, timing the button press would require a huge amount of luck. Good thing that balloons aren't our only option. Bombs are still on the table and much more effective. It's possible to roll the ball down to the starting area, although it does have a penchant for falling off. After some testing, I found that 8 is the perfect number of bombs to launch the sphere, and as a bonus, the explosion activates the target. Room 1 complete. The second puzzle is much easier because the ball starts above the target and all it needs is a push. I stalled it on the slope with an octoballoon, then dived down and timed the platform by looking up as it fell. Jonyu is, without a doubt, the most challenging crystal shrine in the entire game. The altar is located underground at the opposite end of a flowing river with minimal save points along the way, and if the crystal ever falls into the water, it's teleported back to its starting location. An ice bridge works to reach the first island, but between there and the second, the river's flow changes and will sweep the ice away with nothing to stabilize it against. I never managed to float the crystal to the next haven, so clearly this puzzle demanded a change of strategy. Hoverstones have already shown their use in this run, and they are, once again, essential here. Man, the Zonai get too much credit. They're out here breaking laws of physics left and right, but they still couldn't figure out a way to defeat Ganondorf, and then Link comes along and does it in under an hour? Well, I'm still happy to use their inventions, because somehow the anti-gravity features of this device also prevent it from being pushed by water currents. Don't ask me how, but even this doesn't trivialize things, because the stones will deactivate if Link goes beyond a certain distance, preventing me from simply building a path to the end. Plus, I can't drop them into the water while standing on one, I have to be in the air first. The strategy I settled on was blocking up the river with a few hoverstones, then using ice to build a path to the next area, and repeat. It was pretty nerve-wracking jumping between the final platforms because one slip-up would mean completely starting over, but thankfully I was not forced to relive the previous 40 minutes of my life. 2-2-1 needs the player to, say it with me everyone, get the ball in the hole. But a few special circumstances makes it one of the hardest of these challenges in the whole game. For starters, the orb is not within reach, as each new one begins its life by rolling into the void. The only way to get in balloon throwing range is by making a tricky jump onto this stake, then riding the updraft to this platform. From here, I needed to get the sphere under control, and with the inconsistent balloons, that is not fun. The goal is to knock it to the starting area, one way or another, and that's best accomplished with bombs or arrows. When an explosion is the perfect distance away, it can push the object without destroying the octoballoons. In my successful attempt, I dropped it onto the top platform, then bombed it to the main area from there. Now, how do I get it across this gap? At first, I tried using bombs, but without any consistent setup, my results were all over the place. Balloons often floated it too high to land on the goal's roof, but there is a quirk that allowed me to accelerate it more at the beginning. By throwing the balloon at the bottom of an object, it will rotate as it floats up, giving it forward momentum. Triple shooting continually pushed it further until I could pop the balloon and have it fall into the goal. Megalovania is a shrine that I wanted to pretend didn't exist for as long as I could. The player is intended to rotate and place some blocks to match the other structure. Dead simple with Ultra Hand, not quite so without. It's obviously possible. Octoballoons can, hypothetically, manipulate any physics object in any way, but the exactitude called for by this challenge is on a whole new level. At least the first puzzle can be skipped by flying over the barrier, so there's some good news, but the next puzzle is way more complicated, with 3 large blocks instead of 2 small ones. I recommend starting with the snake, then the L, and finally the tridirectional block, because it sits on top of both. Obviously, even when the block lands on top, it won't be perfect, so repeated jump attacks can slowly push it into an acceptable position. If you really want to do this shrine without Ultra Hand for yourself,
Stop it. Get some help.
I finished off the final block with a bomb to snap it into position, but this is a dangerous strategy, as a misplaced explosion can push out a partially placed piece. At first, Mimic seems simple, with a solution similar to so many others I've already discussed. Get the orb into the hole. The twist is that, well, things are twisted. The goal is rotated 90 degrees, in the air, over the void. So while I knew this was possible from the moment I stepped inside, actually executing that solution was a completely different matter. Float the ball into the goal. How hard could it possibly be? I'll give you a little hint. Mimic holds the, coveted record as the shrine which took me the most time to beat in the entire challenge, at nearly 3.5 hours. Step 1 is the easiest. Stop the ball from rolling off the platform. My preferred method for this was a gusting weapon, which also makes it easier to manipulate afterwards. Next, choose the location of the goal. I started off with it closer to the door, but after hours of failed attempts, I switched to the other position, which allowed me to jump off the starting platform and fire my triple shot bow in bullet time to direct the orb. There's no way to accurately convey the torment produced by hours of this activity, and while I could show a montage of every time I got the goal to light up before the ball fell out and the door didn't open, I'm not going to scrub through all of my footage just to relive my greatest miseries. Here's the attempt I succeeded. Please let's move on. Mimic might have taken me slightly longer, but Soryatanag is the shrine I'm most proud of in this entire challenge. I needed to destroy these sand piles with wind to get the key and open the next area, but the provided fan is hard-coded to only be released with Ultra Hand, so a gusting weapon is required. The next room is where the real magic happened, if by real you mean excessive, and by magic you mean agony, because this one also took me multiple hours. The player needs to reflect light onto the detector long enough for it to turn green and make the door open. It's possible to set things up by flying up the wall with a fan, clearing off the light and putting the mirror on top of it, but after that there wasn't anything I could do. I can carry a mirror around the other area, but Link is nowhere near tall enough to reflect the light. I tried floating it with octoballoons, but could never get it to point at the light detector for longer than a split second. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, silly Drengoder, doesn't he know that you can just use Dazzle Fruit to activate the light detectors? Okay, I swear I wrote that joke before releasing part 1. I guess I'm just psychic? Cool. Anyway, I tried light-emitting plants. Bright blooms kinda look like they work, but don't actually do anything, and Dazzle Fruit are super inconsistent. The only surefire way I know of to activate with Dazzle Fruit is by fusing them to a multi-shot bow, and that's obviously not allowed in this challenge. So, I've gotta use the provided mirrors to reflect the light. Somehow. After a bit longer messing around, I realized that this mound of sand in the corner got Link almost high enough to reflect the light, but not quite. However, there are a number of physics objects in the shrine, so if I could get one of them on top and stand on it, that might just be barely enough. Fans will fall over, rather unfortunately, so I guess it's up to the only other type of physics object here. Chests. Chests suck because you can't pick them up. However, it is possible to knock them around by swinging weapons, but they do not go gentle up that steep slope of sand. After trying for nearly an hour with various items, weapons, and configurations, I reloaded my save and tossed an octo balloon at the chest. Yeah, go on then, pop the balloon and down the chest tumbles. Knowing I might never get another chance as good as this one, I picked up the mirror and jumped onto the chest. While it's very slippery and hard to stay on top while looking in the right direction, the mirror was just barely high enough to reflect a beam of light straight into the detector. Yes, it's about time. Completing Soryatanag brings the total to 144 shrines. Certainly respectable, but that still leaves 8 unconquered, which is not gonna fly on my watch. 4 of those 8 shrines are located inside the Lost Woods, also known as Korok Forest, where those cute little delicious creatures hang out. Well, cute for the first 30 seeds, not so much for the next 900, but Korok seeds are irrelevant to this challenge. The real problem is that the forest is surrounded by magical fog, and whenever Link tries to enter it, he's teleported back to the last ground he stood on, unable to interact with anything inside the trees. This poses a bit of a problem for completing all the shrines without using abilities, because the only way to enter is by ascending from the depths, then cleanse the Great Deku Tree by falling back down there to kill Gloomhands and the resulting Phantom Ganon, and now you get access to those lovely Lights of Blessing. Well, if the game really wants me to use runes to enter the forest, the only way to work around that will be to find some clever glitch. The first thing I tried was pretty obvious, just throw myself at the forest from above and hope that worked. Spoiler alert, it did not. I got close enough to some of the shrines for them to appear on my map, but was never able to interact with them before getting teleported back to the Sky Island I started from. Well, Nintendo, if you're gonna be so insistent that I approach Korok Forest from below, I'll play your little game. It's time to add a new glitch to my arsenal, the Infinite Height Clip. I'll be calling it... Nope, never mind. It's functionally the same as the normal Infinite Height glitch, but utilizes Link's shifting hitbox to phase through ceilings. Basically just Ascend, but more awesome because he's doing a flip. The mid-air attack animation for two-handed weapons starts with Link upside down, so canceling that with bullet time can cause him to pop straight through. If there's an adjacent slope, the player will land out of bounds by activating a shield surf. Okay, cool, but what can we do here? Going for a swim in invisible water is nice and refreshing, but it doesn't help finish the shrines. To get a feeling for this glitch, I used the same location as the any% speedrun, and once I clipped through, I glided on a wing until I was underneath the Lost Woods. Now it was just a matter of getting up to the surface. You've never felt true suffering unless you have flown up 300 units with the Infinite Height glitch in Tears of the Kingdom. But I knew it would all be worth it for those 4 shrines, the shrines that everyone thinks are impossible. So I kept going. At one point, I climbed on a gloom-covered wall, and when I saw my health beginning to mend, I knew that I was close. I was so close. Just a bit further and... Wait, why are my coordinates changing so fast? Why did the UI disappear? What's making my screen go black? No! I spent an hour trying to do this, and it was all for nothing? Okay. Deep breaths. I will live to see tomorrow. Probably. It's possible that some freak accident will kill me later today. It seems that the fog of Korok Forest extends all the way down to -100, so it's not going to be as simple as approaching from below. I thought that maybe the fog didn't exist in the pillar the player was meant to ascend up, so I tried for a while to clip into the surrounding geometry without any success. But eventually I found out that this little nearby dent in the ceiling is the perfect place for an easy clip. And there's no real reason to go to the surface when everything I could ever want is already down here in the depths with me. See that big old tree trunk? That's where the mini-boss is, and now that I'm out of bounds, I can literally just glide on over there and climb up. What I can't do is actually enter the boss fight, but as it turns out, that actually makes things easier. Directly underneath the fight is a large gloom-covered area where I can repeatedly snipe the hands, because arrows phase right through out-of-bounds walls. With attack up food and armor, my triple-shot line elbow made short work of the Phantom Ganon, and in an even greater stroke of luck, the subsequent cutscene teleported me back in bounds. This was it, my chance to finally reach Korok Forest proper with one last major hurdle. I was now at the bottom of the depths, and with no way through the fog in the overworld, my only way out was up. Okay, perhaps I'm sensationalizing this. If you've gotten this far into the video, you've probably already thought up loads of ways to get all the way from -600 to +150. If worst comes to worst, I could always use the Infinite Height glitch, but that was beyond a last resort. There must be an easier way. Climbing, for instance. Except, nope, I couldn't just climb out. There's a lip that surrounds the entire bottom area, and it's too horizontal to clamber around. Even if I could, I didn't have enough stamina food to reach the top. But there's always an infinite height technique staring my patience in the eye and daring it to blink. Balloons on hoverstones. Once again, I must say thank you, Perry P. Podcaster, for inventing the podcast. You have my eternal gratitude. Around -30, my platform unexpectedly vanished, forcing me to climb the rest of the way. Even without stamina food, I probably would have been alright by chaining mid-air wing spawns, but with speed applied, I had a little more than enough to make it. Yes, here I am in Korok Forest, now to tackle this quadfecta of shrines. I started with Misanakir, mostly because it was the closest, but also because it's a target shrine and trivialized by throwing bombs. Sekunbomar forced me to fight through an enemy gauntlet with a crystal Talos at the end, none of which is affected by runes. Korok won't give me Papunk's crystal until I give him 5 golden apples in exchange, which I quickly collected outside of Sonopan's shrine. Ninjas is the easiest of them all, requiring nothing more than approaching it from the air. Since that's literally what I tried to do back at the beginning, it's safe to say that this didn't exactly pose a roadblock. So that's another 4 down, and my counter is at 148! I'm so close! 97.368% of the way there for you math nerds. But these concluding shrines are some of the trickiest in the entire game, and had me convinced of their impossibility for almost the entire run. Mawix is a blessing shrine found in Bonnet Pond East Cave. Aw man, pronouncing that accent makes me feel so cultured. Anyhow, the only way up to it is by ascending through this old fossil thing, but there's only a dinky wooden platform to stop me from climbing up another way. There must be a place I'm able to clip through it, right? But no matter where I tried, I wasn't able to. I thought it was a lost cause. And then I learned an absolutely revolutionary piece of information that will change my life forever. I am stupid. Just incredibly dumb. There are literally 2 other entrances to the cave that allow immediate access to the shrine, so it really belongs all the way back at the beginning of part 1 about blessings found in caves. One of the easiest in the whole game. This is only slightly less embarrassing than mispronouncing a fire container as women's undergarments. Whoops. Utojus is unlocked by a quest that's gotta be one of the simplest in the entire game. Seriously, all that's required is basic reading comprehension skills. So what's so hard about— oh. Well dang it. Pack it up, boys and girls, we had a good run. It doesn't matter what type of wing you actually use. Keese, Aracuda, Gibdo, or gliders all work to create a soaring spear that can be thrown far enough to reach the ring. Obviously, I tried some other desperate strategies like throwing a different soaring weapon or leaving a spear inside the ring before activating it, but it seems like the game specifically checks that the weapon is in the thrown state. As bad as that may sound, there is a teeny tiny oversight in this. Well, it would be quite generous to call it a puzzle, but here we are. Whatever Zonai weirdo put this together didn't bother to check for half of what they were asking for. See, it turns out that the only thing necessary to activate the shrine is throwing a Zonai spear through the ring. Ordinarily, this is impossible because of one particularly weak link. But the devs forgot that this is a fantasy world where magical flotation creatures can repair any weapon. But not only can Octoroks repair a weapon, they can spit it back out even better than it started with a variety of bonus buffs, such as attack up, durability up, critical hit, attack up, and even durability up. But what had me reloading over and over in this challenge was the long throw modifier, which, no, I shouldn't have to explain what that does. And yeah, it's that easy. I was thinking of glitches that might allow me to transfer a wing between weapons or make a captain construct pick up a spear, but no, the choice is completely possible by using intended game mechanics. 150 down, 2 to go. Kizunona just requires that 7 wind turbines are all activated simultaneously. Seems like that should be simple with all the resources at my disposal, but octoballoons don't work, bombs don't work, arrows don't work, and there's no way to activate them all with just the 2 fans and a gust weapon.
Hey, did you try using bombs?
Oh, you again. And you sound like a broken record. I just said I tried using bombs. I'm not an idiot. Fine, I'm not always an idiot.
Okay, but did you try like a lot of bombs? Like enough to level a small skyscraper?
More explosives is usually the answer. At least that's what my experience as an American has taught me. I guess it's worth a shot. Turns out that explosions actually can spin the turbines, but that the particle effects from a single thrown bomb last longer than the turbine spins, so I had no way of knowing that. When hit by many explosions though, it can spin long enough for both me and the game to register it. With this knowledge, all I needed to do was properly arrange bombs inside the shrine, then trigger them and the door will open. Surprisingly, one of the easiest shrines in the game. Had I known this strategy sooner, it certainly would have been in part 1. Now only a single shrine stands between me and completing this challenge. The last couple might have been possible with some underutilized game mechanics, but I knew from the beginning that Joku Usin wouldn't be possible to complete without glitches. It's completely encased in stone, and the only way in is by ascending. But we already know how to clip into stuff, right? Well, not so fast. Infinite height clips require very specific terrain to be successful, and the ceiling underneath the shrine is basically flat. Instead, this challenge's final shrine requires an appropriately cool new glitch, Zuggling. That is the first time I've ever said that word out loud, and wow, it sounds way weirder than I thought it would. So, what can Zuggling do for me? By standing a short distance from a wall with my weapon out, dropping a bunch of bows, dropping my current weapon, equipping a new one, then unpausing and repausing super fast, the game gets, shall we say, confused. I'm not going to go into all the technical details, mainly because I'd have no idea what I'm talking about, but the short version is that after doing this a few times, both the world and the inventory think they contain the weapon, leading the Link definitely but not really holding it. With this, you can repeatedly stack weapons for absurd amounts of damage, but for my purposes, that's just a fun side effect. Do this enough, like 10 or 15 times, and you've completed the Zuggle overload, making all sorts of other crazy things start to happen. Link might T-pose or completely disconnect from his character model. The best part? Mounting a steering stick will send you straight through the floor. Now you see what I've been getting at. Once I'd successfully overloaded the game, I warped to Rebella Wetlands Tower and flew over to the Thunderhead Isles. Yeah, this works between warps. It is absolutely overpowered. Once I was directly above the shrine, I dropped a steering stick, got on, and whoops, didn't quite think that through. I fell straight past the shrine room and into the storm below. But there's an easy solution to this problem because collision will resume working normally as soon as Link dismounts the device. So I reloaded my save and all I had to do was mash B as soon as I got on. Made it! I'm here at the final shrine. All that's left is to get in there and show these proving grounds what's what. And would you look at that? Link's smuggled weapons remain even though all his equipment was removed. One-shotting every enemy feels appropriately climactic for the end of this long journey. That's it! With 152 complete, I grabbed my reward to prove that it is possible to beat every shrine without runes in Tears of the Kingdom, on version 1.1.0 at least. Massive shout out to TheBoxLynx for his ingenious solutions to Ryagok, Itoja's Kisanona, and clipping underneath Korok Forest. He's got his own video on the topic coming soon with all sorts of different crazy strategies, and the links to his YouTube and Twitch channels are in the description, so make sure to go show him some love. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I would be forever in your debt if you shared this video with any friends or communities you think would appreciate it. Have a delightful day, and I hope to see you next time.